Welcome to Higher Education Advocates Podcast. This podcast is about supporting students and families as they navigate through the post-secondary complexities of college. From time to time, I will touch base on current events. Expect to hear jam-packed information that includes strategies and tips. The goal is to empower families and help them make informed decisions. Expect to hear from higher education professionals, HR professionals, tax pros, mental health professionals, financial aid administrators, students, parents, plus more. My name is Teresa Harris, and I'm a college financial aid expert. I'm also the founder and owner of Scholarship Momma. I have a master's in higher education, and I am an alum of Robert Morris University in Chicago. I'm a wife, mom, and grandmother. My heart is for our youth, but the information I'm sharing is relevant for all age groups. When it comes to college, my experience as an adult student was fantastic. I was eager to learn and ready to start a new career, and the only way I could pay for college was to borrow loans. One thing I failed to realize is the impact student loans would have on my future. I borrowed thousands of dollars during my undergraduate career, and as time went on, the amount I owed ballooned. As of this recording, I'm still paying off student loans, and I completed college years ago. For the record, I don't have anything against student loans, but I do believe in responsible borrowing, which is something I didn't do. As for the podcast, expect to hear from me on a bi-weekly basis. This podcast is available on Anchor FM and Scholarship Momma YouTube channel. For more information, check out my website, www.scholarshipmomma.com. Welcome to Higher Education Advocates Podcast. And hello, new listeners. This is Teresa Harris, aka Scholarship Momma. And today we have Natasha Hamilton with us. Natasha Hamilton is an educational advocate and healing justice focused professional with 15 years of program management and program support experience. Natasha, there is so much I can say about you, but I will let you tell the listeners. Tell us a little bit more about you.
First off, thank you so much for this warm introduction and this opportunity. I'm very excited to be here with you this afternoon. Yeah, that's part of it. I am also an Army brat. I'm also somebody who's very passionate about healing justice work. I currently live in Chicago. I work here. I've been here for the last 7 years. So it's been really important for me to cultivate very important and deep relationships across the Chicago landscape while addressing the very serious and complex issues that exist within the educational landscape here. So I'm very pleased to share a bit more about just that work that I do, as well as my background too. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, Natasha. Tell us a little bit about your post-secondary journey.
Yes. So I have to start by saying that it neither for grad school or for college wasn't what I expected. And so I think that there are a lot of listeners out there that can probably relate to that now with the way that the landscape is changing for post-secondary, but it was not a straight way through. I ended up taking a gap year after sophomore year. I started out at one institution, and then after sort of rethinking my time there and thinking about what I wanted for myself and how I wanted to engage with work as a professional, I needed a change. And so I took that gap year and I worked for that year, and then I ended up transferring. So my bachelor's degree is from the University of Michigan, which I'm super pumped about. And that was where I spent the rest of my time. I would say that in terms of that journey in general, I think it's important to reiterate that it wasn't linear. And I think that that's okay. I think it's important for people to know that they can pause for real life and take time to reevaluate and really choose a pathway that feels very much in line with where they hope to be in the future. So that I would say the one thing I would do differently, because I did lose a lot of transfer credit, I do feel like in some ways, my college experience was a bit of a cautionary tale in that regard. I think I would have probably, if I could do it again, maybe take some classes or a class or two during that gap time. So I didn't have to work so back to back, like over the course of junior and senior year and the summer to graduate with exactly 120 credits. But I did it. I definitely did it. And I ending up in a major and in a field that felt more aligned with who I am as a person. So studied psychology. I continued that in grad school. And I don't know, I mean, can you imagine me as a business major? Maybe. But yeah, I just think I would want to reiterate in terms of my own pathway that it's important to really think about what you want as somebody who's pursuing and continuing education, and really think about what that means for you. And I know that can be really tough for a lot of kids who are first generation like I was. There's lots of pressure in that way to pick something that would make your family proud or your parents proud. And I just think that really aligning to what you want and what you hope to be true is really important. So yeah, I probably could have saved a lot more money generally on that nonlinear path. Even though I had a bunch of college credit from AP classes, I ended up losing about a semester's worth of credit when I transferred because the institution that I transferred from didn't match the U of M standard. And yeah, that would be my redo. If I could take some summer classes during that gap year, that would have been great. But yeah, I think we should embrace the fullness of our past, just knowing that life happens.
Exactly. Well, look, Natasha, we have so much in common. First gen, gap year. I can certainly relate. You said something really important here. You said gap year. Can you explain to the listeners what a gap year is? Because I am hearing that term more and more. And so tell us what a gap year is.
Absolutely. So for me, it was a pause. It was a pause in my academic studies where I started out at one place consecutively freshman year, sophomore year, and then I paused for an entire year to get my life together, to sort out where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, and to align myself with a path that felt more true to who I was. And so that pause really helped me to get very clear about that and where I wanted to go and what I wanted to study. And it sort of reiterated for me that I needed to do work that was connected to people, and I needed to do work that was connected to education. And so, yeah, that pause absolutely helped inform that decision, so that by the time I arrived on campus at the University of Michigan, like I felt very directed, like I felt very purposed, and I felt very, in terms of what I wanted to be true, I felt like I was on a very good path for me. So, and I would say the same is true for graduate school too. So I ended up, after graduating, and I'm sure lots of listeners can relate to this too, after that crunch of trying to get all of those credits and to graduate with exactly 120, I was tired. So between undergraduate and graduate school, I took a 5-year gap or pause to work, to get some experience, and then to go back and study psychology, educational psychology in a more intentional way. So yeah, I think for me, the gap was the right decision. It really affirmed my need to really get clear about what I wanted in terms of my education, and then more importantly, in terms of what I hope to do with that. And so I encourage you all, like as you are listening, if a pause feels important to you, you can take it. And the world is not going to end. Things might feel uncertain, but really in that pause, it really does create an opportunity for you to set the next steps with intention, so that you can arrive where you hope to be.
Thank you for thoroughly explaining that. Thank you. What are the biggest lessons that you have learned during this global pandemic?
Yes, that is a big question. I think we've all experienced so much personally, professionally, interpersonally, and I think that this time and space it's really reminded me how important my people are, like how important community is and community building. Like that became even more important to me, just how I'm finding ways to connect with others. And I will say that in terms of the protests and uprising that happened last summer, it just really brought to the front and center for me the healing and social justice work that I want to continue. I think of myself as an educational advocate, and really what frames my vision is thinking about how I can be of service in this moment, in this movement. And so for me, it really did help launch a personal and collective vision that's focused on embodiment, that's focused on decolonization, focused on unschooling, particularly for Black and Indigenous people of color. So it was very clarifying for me in that way. In terms of community and focusing on just what does it take to heal a lot of that trauma and thinking about through the educational context, how are we sort of reckoning with the stories that we've been told? So I've been very honored to be in community with a collective called El Griot and Areito project. And it's great because it's mostly Black and Latinx folks like myself. And we are sort of an intergenerational collective. Like, it started out as a reading group and a writing community, and it's evolved into a way for us to share stories of resistance and joy. We've hosted a couple of events. We're thinking about some summer projects, like there's a mutual aid effort happening. So it just really brought home for me the importance of community and collective effort. And so I am, in the ways that are possible and accessible to me, continuing to find ways to bring that into my professional work as well, like making sure that that exists as I engage with the world in education as a professional too. So we're super cool. We're called El Griot and Areito Project, and you can follow us on Instagram, and I'll make sure that Teresa has the notes for you. But yeah, we're super excited, and I'm super excited to be a part of that project.
It sounds exciting. Yes, we're going to get the information by the end of this podcast for our listeners. So thank you for sharing that. I could just tell that you are really passionate about healing and social justice work. How does that fit into a more expansive vision of what education can be?
Absolutely. I think we've all seen in the last year and 14 months now how limiting education has been historically for certain members of just American society, right? It's not always been inclusive. It's not always shared stories accurately. It's not always framed people of color, Black people, brown people, Indigenous people in particular in favorable lights. And so I think that what's so important about this embodiment work and this healing justice work is that it invites us to just have a bigger vision, to be more creative about how we're thinking about learning, how we're thinking about education, and how we can make it more inclusive of all of the histories that make us who we are. And so I think this emphasis on wholeness and embodiment and also decolonization and unschooling just reminds us that we are living history. We carry so many stories. Yes. And why, right? Like why yes. we need to be affirmed in those stories. Those stories need to be acknowledged. And so I think that's just a real opportunity for growth in terms of education. I hope, that is my hope, that as we continue to emerge from this pandemic space, that we are thinking very critically about education and how we want to make it better and more inclusive moving forward.
Yeah, and Natasha, thank you for that. Thank you for the work that you do during Black History Month. I did a whole series on the HBCUs, and it is just amazing. The HBCUs and the work that they do is amazing. And the history and the legacy behind the HBCUs. And so it's lots of contributions that we have made to society. So just thank you for the work that you do. And thank you just for keeping that at the forefront. So appreciative of that, of the work you're doing. And I'm right behind you.
I know, you're right beside me. You're right with me doing this, okay? This is a collaborative communal effort. Yeah. I am because you are, so yeah.
Yes. Okay, so what do you want students to know about continuing their education during and after this pandemic? It's challenging times, yeah.
It really is. It really is. And I don't think we can state that enough. It's been such a profound time of upheaval. And so in many ways, we've all had to pause certain things in our lives, whether we've lost somebody during this time, whether we've had to really be really creative about how we are trying to survive, and beyond that, like how we are trying to plant the seeds for like just a better life and what it would mean to thrive. That's a lot to hold. I think what I want students to know is that a nonlinear path is more than okay. And let's normalize that. Let's normalize that you might have to pause your studies. Let's normalize that you might have to reevaluate what you're studying. Some people might have to work and study. because life happens literally all of the time. I really want higher education and just education in general to evolve to this, just acknowledging the fullness of our humanity. And so I hope students and families feel empowered to do what they feel is in their best interest. If it is pausing, pause, but be intentional about it. And so during that pause, find ways to be creative about creating the conditions that'll help you transition smoothly. Like, don't do what I did. I mean, if I had that redo, like I would have thought that pause a bit differently. But I think being really intentional about it and being very clear about who you are, what it is that you want, and knowing more importantly, like who's in your corner, like who's going to help you work towards that vision. And cool if it's somebody in your family, cool if it's somebody at your workplace, awesome if it's somebody from the school that you're currently attending, or like other people that have similar interests. Just, I think the intentionality and the mindfulness with which we can approach conversations around continuing education, just feels really important, and I think it's also important for students to know that you don't have to know all the answers now. Like, it's not possible to know all the answers now. Like, but if you figure out all the answers, I encourage you to write a book. And please plug Teresa Harris so she gets credit for at least like drawing this question and answer out of me. But I just want students to know that their path and their trajectory might have some bumps, some turns, some twists, but that's more than okay.
Your answer is such a confirmation. I was just thinking about this yesterday, how this summer would look for families, how this summer would look for our youth. And the only thing that I can really think about is relax, enjoy the summer. Enjoy the summer. And so it's just a confirmation that you should mention that, because with everything that has happening, still happening, the unknowns, the challenges that we have yet to face.
Right.
Let's just enjoy this summer.
Yes, I'm all for that.
Before school kicks back in the fall, because it's such a short period of time. So let's take some time to relax and just, do the things that families should do or teenagers should do, because school is right around the corner. So thank you. It's such a confirmation when you say that, because that was my thought on yesterday. Speaking of that, what or where do you see spaces of hope and possibility in education?
I am so inspired by young people right now, just in terms of how I've been able to watch them engage with this time and space as critical thinkers, as people who are caring about the conditions that they're a part of. And we continue to see how students are using their voice to advocate for themselves and their educational needs. We've seen students over the course of this pandemic time, demand more from the educational powers that exist here in the city. They are letting people know what they need. And so I think that has given me a lot of hope about students, and certainly about this generation upcoming, that they're paying attention. Like, students, young people know more than we give credit to them for knowing. I hope to continue to see educational spaces and that just honor the fullness of that kids know too, students know too. Like, we all have different degrees of knowing. And so I'm always pleased and very proud when students find their voice.
I'm a scholarship reader, and when I'm reading those essays, I'm in totally agreement with you. Our students have a voice. They know more than what we know, than we think they know. And I'm in awe when I read those scholarship essays. Our students are really, they're out here. Their voices are critical, like you say, and I'm blown away. So you are absolutely right. Now, here's my last question. Sure. What are you most excited about for young people as they explore their post-secondary options?
Man, I think just number one, that the world is literally their oyster. There are so many new fields of study that are emerging, and that will continue to emerge in the years ahead. And so we need their bright talents, their intelligent minds to work towards those things that benefit humanity. So that's number one. I think I'm really excited that there are tons of options for kids, whether or not you're choosing college or a certificate program or a training program, or you're doing independent study or collective study. Any type of continuing education, in my opinion, creates more opportunities for young people to become better versions of themselves, right? Just think about what it feels like to learn. Like, things unlock in terms of opportunities, things unlock in terms of your own awareness, things unlock in terms of how you relate and connect to one another. So I think I'm really excited about that. It's just an opportunity for students to experience that expansiveness. I think that's beautiful. That, and then also too, that there's so much scholarship money out there. To your point earlier, there's so much scholarship money. I've had the pleasure of sitting in on a couple of your workshops and I think that there's so many opportunities for students to subsidize their learning, and with free money, so they're not paying back student loans still like I am. And two, as they're considering different pathways, like if they're working, there are more businesses and more organizations that are incentivizing folks to continue their education, whether it's scholarships or loan forgiveness or tuition reimbursement. So I think there's just so many more opportunities available for students to continue their education in a variety of different ways that weren't always accessible or have not been spoken about on the same level as college. So I'm excited to see new things emerge and new pathways emerge. And I'm like, wow, what's next?
I say the same thing. I get super excited too. Yeah, but speaking of scholarships and student loans, Natasha is right in regards to those workshops. And so I love doing scholarship workshops. But I'm so glad that you mentioned student loans, because breaking news right before the recording of this podcast, it was announced that student loans the interest rate is increasing in July. So families, college-bound families, scholarships is an option. It is out there for you, and there is many. Natasha, just thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else you want us to know about you?
That education is important to me, and I value it in all the forms that it comes in. Sometimes learning comes from books. Sometimes learning happens when you're able to connect with others and share experiences. I think that having the understanding that learning comes in a variety of different forms, and just for us to be open about that and the opportunities that come our way. That's it.
Awesome. Can you share that Instagram channel with us so the followers, the listeners,
absolutely.
Can follow that? Yeah.
Thank you so much. El Griot and Areito project, and I'll spell it for you. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. But on Instagram, we are at El Griot and Areito project, which is ElGriotAndAreito El Griot and Areito project.
Okay. And is this the same handles on Facebook and YouTube as well?
Absolutely. And a simple Google search will prompt it too.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Natasha, for sharing these nuggets with college-bound families. And thank you, listeners.